Hello and welcome to the first episode of my Midschool life. Some of you guys may know me from the BMX Museum, some may know me from the Rad forums, and some may have seen me on Facebook. I collect desirable Midschool bikes. I restore them, which can be controversial, but I suppose it depends with what you begin with. I'm not into buying mint frames because they're really expensive, and I have the tools and skills, thankfully, to be able to restore them myself, which saves me a lot of money because, as you soon learn, restoring bikes is not cheap, especially if you take it to a powder coater. So this is episode 1, and as you can see, we've got an early 2000s Morales BTS. There's been a lot of this debate and discussion over this because everyone says, "Oh, it's a poverty BTS by Dan's Comp." So the story kind of goes like this. In the 90s, Bob Morales started his own company, and he started with a lot of flatland frames with a twin top tube. Somewhere in the middle of that, he decided that he was going to make a street frame, better than what you do in bed, BTS, yeah. It wasn't, in my opinion, a street bike. It had a sub 18-inch top tube, and peg bosses that were nice. They looked nice, but I was a street rider in the 90s and I wouldn't have ridden a bike that was that short. So then in the late 90s, come early 2000s, Bob decided he was going to make it with a 21-inch top tube, which is what you see here. However, there was a lot of problems with the manufacturing and the guy that was making the frames for him, and Bob got a bit busy with Core and his mountain bike stuff, as well as other ventures, and decided that he didn't want the frames that the guy had made. He said that they had defects, and he was probably right. They didn't look fantastic, at which point somewhere Bob refused to take the frames, and Dan's Comp ended up with a load of them. Now, they were never made by Dan's Comp, they were never commissioned by Dan's Comp. It's just that Dan's Comp were a bit cutthroat in the fact that they would buy anything, stick their poverty logo on it, and then sell it at a reduced price, which I suppose was really good for riders, but it did devalue some of the stuff that was out there. I guess that's subjective. I suppose if you were riding, then you didn't care. You just wanted the cheapest, best stuff you could get your hands on, which has always been true in my opinion. And so, yeah, Dan's Comp sold incomplete frames, and they did a raw version, which was like raw, totally raw, just raw metal. No clear coat, no paint, nothing. So they were absolute rot boxes. And they did a metallic blue version that was $10 or $20 more expensive and had their own Big Tough Street, which is what they'd renamed the frame, obviously for copyright issues, decals on it. So what we have here is a somewhat early 2000s, because they're impossible to put a date stamp on, Morales BTS. Now, the difference between the poverty and the Morales is the Morales ones are finished. So they've got cable stops, as you can just about make out there. They were straighter. They didn't have any weld warping issues. And they came in finishes, which this one originally had about a millimetre of black powder coat on it, And then the German guy that I bought it from had spray bombed it orange, which is what gave me the idea to, restore it in orange. So after about 2 days of stripping off this ridiculous powder coat, I got it down to the bare metal, at which point I filed off any welding slag, which is common. A lot of people don't bother dressing things before they finish them. I had to fill a couple of dents in the bash tube, which is a 2-inch tube that wraps around from the down tube all the way round past the bottom bracket. I had to use a bit of JB weld on that. I don't rate filler, it's not worth putting in there. There was some sprocket rash inside the rear dropout where it hadn't been lined up properly, because these are quite hard to align the cranks on because of the massively oversized tubing. And the dropouts looked like they'd been cut with a butter knife. So I smoothed all of that off with a file, etc., etc. Repainted it in NBA Jam Orange, which was just called Jam on the tin, and then gave it a gold pearlescent flake. Parts wise, it's running a set of Kinlin Ultra Steady Class rims, which are hard anodised in grey. They've been built with Sapim orange nipples and British stainless spokes. The front hub is made by Ultimate Hardware, who were a part of the Nottingham Massive, which, oddly enough, the fork and the stem are both made by Conspiracy Bikes, which was all a part of that scene that was owned by the guy that owned Rock and Roll Bikes and Onza and quite a few of the British pieces of the pie. The rear hub is a gusset tape, which is quite funny when it's a gusset tape cassette. I guess that's got kind of a ring to it. It's left-hand drive. I didn't realise this when I bought it. It was new old stock, just like the front one. So the cranks had to be reversed for left-hand drive, and I had to switch the pedal bodies. The pedals are Superstar. They're a reimagining of the Brooklyn Schimburgers. The bash guard is a Black Spire, The Grind. It's a Canadian company that is made in Canada. It's 1/2 inch thick. The cranks are made by a company called RC with a 32mm sprocket hole, which was fun. I originally broke 2 toes trying to drill one out before the power disc you can see on there, made by a friend of mine called Gareth, aka G Parts, was designed and made. So it's a 7mm thick 7000 series aluminium power disc. It's a 5-hole 94 BCD, and that runs onto a 32 tooth Talon chainring, which is about as small as you can go on a Morales, because as you can see, because the bottom bracket is raised because of that bash tube, you don't get a lot of clearance under the frame. So there's only about 1/2 inch of clearance between the bottom of the chain there and the chainstay. Talking of which, the chainstay, as you can see, has been pressed. It looks like it's been pressed for a massive sprocket. It hasn't. It's been pressed for the crank arms, because those tubes, believe it or not, are 1 inch thick. So it's an extremely overbuilt frame. We've got some Maxxis hookworm tyres. Those are new. Demolition Vulcan sealed U-brakes with cool stop fat pads, which actually look quite small on those wheels, which is hilarious. We've got new old stock 6-piece standard strip bars in chrome. New old stock Eclat Ashley Charles grips from about 2007 in orange. Snafu Magician bar ends. Dirt Harry levers. It's a Velo grabber saddle that I've reupholstered with orange suede. We got a 27.2 perv new old stock seat post that's running into a shim with an absolutely massive Hope seat clamp. And it's taken me about 18 months. The work on the frame was all done last summer. It's now in a really nice shape of things, and the paint is lovely. Obviously, the handlebars took me a while to track down. It originally didn't have that matching conspiracy stem on it to go with the fork. I had to track that down, and that showed up. But then that's restoring Midschool bikes, I guess. You can never do it all the first time if you're going to go for a full build, because you just don't have the parts. So you have to, build it with what you've got and then upgrade it, which is nice because it kind of gives you that feeling like you would get back in the day when you bought a new part or whatever else. I do consider it finished now. Obviously, the rear brake pads need to go back since I've put a different cranks set up on it. The wheel is now further back because of the difference in sprocket. But that'll all get sorted out in time, and it'll be on to the next one. I've made a custom stand for it, as you probably noticed. It's one of those basic zinc ones with some side caps on it. But yeah, that's about it. And I know a lot of people don't like restored bikes. They don't like repainted bikes. But as I said to you, it just depends what state you buy that frame in. Now, I'm not going to spend 2 years or so tracking down new old stock parts to put on a restored build if the frame is just, manky. I've got a lot of respect for the guys that buy rider condition parts that have been very well ridden and battered and build a whole bike up that way, but it's very difficult to take expensive new old stock parts and put them on, a battered old frame. I've got rider bikes. We'll be covering those in time. But for now, this is a early 2000s Morales BTX, and I will see you all soon with another bike. Take it easy.